Welcome back to the Rated Off Real podcast. My name is Sam, and on today's topic is a fun one. We have the secrets and encryptions of Leonardo da Vinci and some of his most famous paintings. We are going to be going over the Vitruvian Man, the Last Supper, the Mona Lisa, and La Belle Ferroniere. All of them having something to do with, well, some very important knowledge. But first, let's discuss who Da Vinci was a little bit for those who don't know. Leonardo da Vinci was known as the Renaissance man during the age of the Renaissance and Enlightenment, someone who was proficient in multiple areas of expertise during his time in the age of the Enlightenment. Da Vinci was proficient in engineering, science, art, mathematics, and biology, and he left behind much knowledge and art for us to gaze upon to this day and learn from almost 500 years later. To create his schematics of the physiology of man, as represented in the Vitruvian Man, he yielded the practice of grave digging. He took dead corpses and dissected them and drew highly detailed paintings from the structure and anatomy of the human body, of the muscles, the ligaments, and the bones that were all exposed through the rotting of the skin. And from this act, he made the Vitruvian Man, a schematic that depicts the anatomy of man, still taught to this day in medical school and deciphered for one of his secret encryptions. And he even grave robbed the dead wombs of women who still had intact fetuses to learn about the female reproductive anatomy and the structure of childbirthing. But above all, what people don't know is that Leonardo da Vinci was a Grand Master to the Priory of Sion, the secret organization in charge of keeping, knowing, and passing down to other Priory members the secret of the Holy Grail. And Dan Brown did a good job with this in the Da Vinci Code. And like him, Sir Isaac Newton was another Grand Master. Presumably in his later years, he uncovered the secrets of the Philosopher's Stone and deciphered the emerald tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. Now, all of Da Vinci's work, it's the work you don't see that holds the most significance. That work being the secret encryptions within his art, especially the Vitruvian Man, the Last Supper, and La Belle Ferroniere. I got a little bug right here, sorry. And not as much, but still some encryptions hidden within the Mona Lisa. Each of them has a different encryption, but each of them has a different encryption. All but the Mona Lisa, every painting of his that I'm about to mention have one thing in common, and that is ancient Egyptian wisdom. Let's find out why. Now, encryption of the Vitruvian Man has within it the Great Pyramid of Giza. The angle from the navel to the top corner of the square, the navel being if we were to imagine the pyramid in front of us, the navel is the center between one of the bottom edges to the very top of the pyramid. It perfectly matches the arm extension of the Vitruvian Man from his center to his arm extending out. That would be 51.843 degrees. The Great Pyramid perfectly embodies also the ratio of the radius of the Earth and the Moon, but by inscribing a circle within the Da Vinci square and raising that circle so the center coincides with the center of the Vitruvian Man at the navel, 6 perfect pyramid cross-sections are revealed, along with an exact geometric match of the Earth and Moon pyramid relationship. Now, this is hard to imagine because I can't share a screen nor do I have visuals, but if you want to, please look it up. It's interesting to see it for yourself. Now, the Vitruvian Man's portions are exact integer ratios of the whole man, and this man is cut up into 14 different sections. If you decrease the height of the man by 1/14, this is a reference to the Eye of Horus myth in which Set cuts Osiris's body into 14 pieces, and 14 pieces of the Vitruvian Man. Now, according to the Rhine Papyrus script, the sekhed of the pyramid, which is the unit of measurement by which pyramid builders use, was 5 palms and 2 fingers per cubit. Try to imagine that. The unit of measurement allowed for the slope of the face of the pyramid to be 14/11, or the mathematical relationship and equivalent of phi. Now, the inverse slope of its edges is 9/10, which gives the relationship of phi and pi, two very important terms in mathematics. When used in conjunction, these two math formulas provide a stability to the Great Pyramid that isn't found in any other pyramids in the region. The most important number that determines the volume of the Great Pyramid, as I said earlier, 51.84 degrees, and Da Vinci encrypted it right at the top of the corner of the Vitruvian Man, the arm extending out from the center to, well, his arm. Now, with clear knowledge of the pyramid, did Da Vinci ever visit Egypt and incorporate his architecture into his work? Well, fiddle this. Da Vinci claimed he did, but no one knows for certainty, although the story goes that he worked for Ottoman Sultan Behzad II of Istanbul, but they were both in Egypt at the time on various engineering projects, and while he was there, he learned about ancient history. But not much of this time is known, for this is what's called as the lost years of Da Vinci, his years that were never accounted for. But, but in the Codex Atlanticus, which I can't help but think the Atlantis Code, the Seers of Atlantis, that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I saw that. The Codex Atlanticus is a book that might hold the secrets to where Da Vinci was during his unaccounted for years. Now, the Pyramid of Giza, the Great Pyramid, the one that has the King's and Queen's Chamber, was originally called Bull Mountain, or Mount Taurus. The Great Pyramid was associated with Apis, or Hep, the chief bull deity of Egypt. Now, in his writings of Mount Taurus in the Codex, the book, Da Vinci wrote, "The peaks of the great mount," or quote-unquote, "the peaks of the great Mount Taurus to the west. These peaks are of such a height that they seem to touch the sky. And in all the world there is no part on earth higher than its summit, and the rays of the sun always fall upon its east side. 4 hours before daytime, and being of the whitest stone, it shines resplendently to fulfill the function of these." Now let's look at that really quick. Few things capture my eye. The peaks of the great mountain to the west. The peaks are such of a great height that they touch the sky, and no other part on earth has this. Now, the pyramid, up until the Eiffel Tower, was the tallest man-made structure in the world. So for Da Vinci to say at this time that it was a man-made structure that hit a hut that was so tall that nothing else on earth compared, that's very true. The rays of sun always fall upon its east side. That's because the sun always does fall upon the pyramid's east side. And of being the whitest stone, it shines resplendently throughout the region. The white stone being the white limestone that was coated on the sides of the pyramids. Although this was from supposedly in the mid-1500s, so one might ask, is he referring to the fully intact pyramid, or the pyramid after it was looted for its treasures? We don't know for certainty, because again, history has a reputation for being uncertain because it has been rewritten so many times. Now, it is clear that Da Vinci had knowledge of the pyramids and of their physical aspects, so chances are he did join there, he was there, and he learned a lot while he was there. Now, the original name of the Giza Plateau was not the Giza Plateau, but the Rostau, or the Rose Cross. In Greek, the word Taurus means bull, but if we read the word backward, if we read Taurus backwards, we get Rostau. Da Vinci knew the connection to the alpha. Alpha is the connection of the bull, referring back to the Great Pyramid in the 51.84 3-degree angle. He is giving a clear description while in Egypt of the Rosa Plateau. And we need to look at the Rosicrucianism as well. Rose Tau means Rose Cross, or the Tau Cross, also referring to the cross Jesus was nailed to that was shaped like the letter T. Now, Da Vinci's next greatest encryption, his lines, were still on the Vitruvian Man, by the way. The lines within the Vitruvian Man reveal a perfect blueprint for the internal structure of the Great Pyramid's chambers. Only the Queen's chamber is missing. Or is it? Now, the Queen Isis, who was the husband and sister of Osiris, while in mourn of her husband being cut into 14 pieces, and this is the story of the myth of Osiris and battle with Set, his husband Osiris being cut into 14 pieces represents the 14 phases of the waning moon. Da Vinci has precisely identified the current subterranean queens and king's chambers before they were ever discovered. The ground level of the pyramid, its side angle, and the Earth-Moon relationship. He knew all about the pyramid, the queen's chamber, king's chamber, the ground level, the bottom level, the subterranean chamber, aka the side angle, and the Earth-Moon relationship, centuries before they were ever known. So a new question remains: does the upper lines in the Vitruvian Man represent unknown hidden chambers? There are 3 of them. Now, and we know this is true, or we don't know this is true for certain, but thanks to the muon scan back in 2017, we know there is a big hidden, hollowed out void chamber that aligns perfectly with the line of the pyramid, or in a different esoteric terms, it aligns with the throat chakra of the human body. It was said that Da Vinci also believed that the pyramid was a representative of the 7 chakras of the human body, from the root to the crown chakra, and each line was perfect. Each line in the Vitruvian Man was a perfect distance away from the other chakras, as is each level in the Great Pyramid, perfectly aligned with the chakras of man. Now, further, these lines point, as I just said, to the crown and third eye chakras above the king's chamber, but there is also underneath the subterranean chamber by the knees of the Vitruvian Man where more lines are. So what else is there? Well, if you ask me, down there is the Hall of Records. Actually, not the Hall of Records, that's underneath the Sphinx's paws, but it most likely is the lost city of Osiris that is connected via tunnels. So Hall of Records couldn't be connected to the pyramid. We just have to dig down further and find out. That is currently off limits to humans because they don't want you to know what's really down there. And we know this for a fact because we can go to Egypt and try to access one of these tunnels. It is sealed off with cinder bricks by the government. They don't want us down there. Now, and this was already in not the city of Osiris, but we know that there is a chamber underneath the Sphinx's paw, given it by Alexander Dunn. I forget the other names of the 2 people, forgive me, but many people, scholars, physicists, and clairvoyants have said, yeah, there is something underneath the pyramids, there's something underneath the Sphinx. And the seismic radar actually proved this a few decades ago via, I can't remember his name for the life of me, I apologize, but Edgar Casey was one of the people that said there is a Hall of Records underneath the Sphinx. And if the Hall of Records is there, then there's more chambers connected to the pyramid underneath the subterranean chambers. And again, they have been sealed off. Now, people speculate Da Vinci knew this esoteric knowledge of the pyramids, and not only was it a power plant generator, as we discussed in the Secrets of the Pyramid podcast, you can watch that now, but it is a ancient passageway for our own conscious mind to ascend from the bottom, lowest vibrational state to the highest vibrational state we can achieve. Now, the builders of the pyramid, I doubt, knew this, and this is why I believe 100% they did not build the pyramid. It was built by Thoth the Atlantean 36,000 years ago, and I did a whole podcast on that. So if you want to see why the pyramid cannot have been built by man, but some being more advanced than us, go check it out. But the fact we have all these connections, it's a power plant generator. It's a representation of elevation to a higher degree of knowledge and spiritualism. There's no way that the Egyptians could have done that, but their gods could have, and they did. And again, if you want to go see that podcast, go see it. I encourage you to. The next painting we are going to discuss is The Last Supper, or one of the most, if not the most popular paintings in the entire world. It is a priceless piece of art. I mean, one moment here, apologies. It is a priceless piece of art that you can't buy or move it because it's painted onto the wall. It's painted on a wall in Santa Marina, Italy. But this holds many encryptions, more than the Vitruvian Man, if you ask me. But the biggest secret of all that it holds, and we can look at the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown to learn from this, because he did a hell of a job deciphering it himself. Or I'm not sure if he deciphered it himself, but he wrote a book on it, and I guarantee you most of that is true. Most of it is actually true. The biggest secret of all in the Last Supper is that the secret life of Jesus Christ. Now, sitting to our left, the Jesus' right side, isn't John the Apostle, but it's actually Mary Magdalene. Now, quick side note, it was said that John the Apostle was another hint by Da Vinci that it was supposed to resemble Da Vinci himself, or a self-portrait. This argument can be made by the Mona Lisa, and this all I'll talk about the Mona Lisa because there's not much juice, there's not too much juicy knowledge within the Mona Lisa, but aside from a few mathematical codes. But this argument can be made by the Mona Lisa that the Mona Lisa is also a self-portrait of Da Vinci hidden behind several different backgrounds that were painted over time. Also hidden mathematical anagrams such as the Fibonacci sequence. Now, large speculation and debates are still going on to this day to determine what the Mona Lisa really is. But if you ask me, it's everything they say it is. Because if the Last Supper and the Vitruvian Man have all these secrets, I guarantee you the Mona Lisa has secrets too. But back to our story. The story we are told is that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute and was going to be killed by a group of very religious people who didn't like the fact she was selling her body in exchange for goods and money. And if I get this story wrong, forgive me and let me know down in the comments what it really is. I should have researched this a little bit more, but this is what I remember learning. She went to Jesus and he saved her by telling the other men, if you have not sinned in your life, then you have no reason to hate this woman for doing what she did. And the men put the stones on the ground and walked away. Now, this story was made up by the Catholic Church to demoralize Mary Magdalene and make her seem like a prostitute and a whore. But that is far from the truth. Another instance in when history has been rewritten by evil to make it seem that to make them let you know what they want you to know. Mary Magdalene was, as a matter of fact, a very kind, gentle, and intelligent woman who was of great importance. When she was the wife to Jesus Christ, and she was the wife to Christ, and much more, she herself was the Holy Grail. And Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code breaks this down very thoroughly. She birthed the canon offspring of Christ and holds the sacred bloodline within her, a bloodline that still remains alive and well to this day. Although I don't know who they are or where they are, but they exist, believe me. She also held the secrets of the Catholic Church and the instructions to build Christianity back from the Dark Ages. And Christianity and the teachings of Christ have also been modified over time. But Mary Magdalene still holds with her that knowledge, and so does the Priory of Sion, who carries the knowledge with them as well. That's why they're a very secretive brotherhood. Only a few members are allowed in. And this is why she is regarded as the Holy Grail. But there's also, that's one of them, but there's a different reason why she is known as the Holy Grail. Most people ask how we know this, and the answer is in the Last Supper. Well, how is Magdalene the Grail? Well, in the Last Supper, there is Mary, John, and Judas, all sitting next to each other. We can see Mary leaning in towards St. John, for he has something to tell her. But Mary isn't holding a knife. We can see her hands are actually folded neatly together, very properly the way a lady is supposed to hold them. And while John is telling Mary a secret, Judas is holding his bag of silver, but there is rumor that St. John was actually misogynistic and had a problem with Mary Magdalene, for he didn't appreciate how close she was with Jesus. It was John's belief that Jesus only loved him and the other apostles, and when he found out Jesus loved Mary, he had a big problem with her. Now, could it be that he was about to stab Mary and kill her, and Judas was holding him back? That it was John's hand that held the dagger and Judas' hand was holding his wrist to prevent this? The answer remains unclear because of how actually unclear the photo is. It has been weathered away over time. I imagine some people maintain it, but it's not a perfect 1080 resolution. It's a little hard to see the actual image, but based on some speculation and actual other facts, we can start to rule this as a possibility and others as not a possibility. And there are accounts, I believe, in the Book of Enoch, some books and stories that didn't make it into the Bible. There are accounts in the fuller version of the story, one of them being the Ethiopian Bible, which I have on me. There are accounts of Magdalene and Christ within these stories sharing their mouths with each other. That's one way people have described it and how the book has described it. And I believe it's even how St. John described it. These were all found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, by the way, back in the 1940s. Now, no one wants to talk about them, though, because they reveal a lot more information on what I just said. Now, in the Last Supper, Mary and Jesus are sitting back to back from each other, forming a perfect V-shaped void in between them at exactly, get this, that V shape, 51.843 degrees, the same degrees as the pyramids yet again. Now, this V represents the feminine, or a chalice, but it also resembles the shape of a woman's womb. The Grail was never indeed a cup, but the symbol of womanhood. The opposite of that, a pyramidal point, an arrow, represents masculine, or the blade in manhood, and it's still used in military uniforms, but we'll focus on the V being a cup and a vessel. Or it could be a cup, or it could be a vessel. In this case, a cup of great power, but in the original Last Supper, it was where the Holy Grail first made its appearance within the supper, but the painting never shows a cup of a Holy Grail of any kind. So why do people say the Last Supper has within it the Holy Grail, a supposed cup? It's because it was never a cup at all. The cup was never a chalice, it was a person. In this case, that person was Mary Magdalene. If you look closely, her and Christ are actually mirror images of each other, both mirrored with red and blue clothing. Christ had a red shirt and blue robe, while Mary had a blue shirt and a red robe. If we were to take Mary's position, put her exactly next to Christ, it resembles two people getting very close to each other and snuggling up to each other because they loved each other. Now, the Last Supper has a few more bombshell encryptions that don't have to do with Christ, a little bit actually, and that is the connection to the pyramids once again. The dimensions of the Last Supper painting resemble none other than the Great Pyramid King's Chamber. One might argue, did the Last Supper even happen at the Mount Zion, or did it happen within the King's Chamber? We don't know. But Da Vinci definitely made sure to put the dimensions of the King's Chamber and take the dimensions of the King's Chamber and make the exact same dimensions as the dimensions within the Last Supper room. Now, while visiting Egypt, Robert Grant sketched two peculiar symbols found on the king's granite sarcophagus. The hollowed out sarcophagus, which isn't a sarcophagus at all because it never held mummies. And again, you want to see the story why, just find the Secrets of the Pyramid podcast where you go into depth why. Now, underneath the table in the Last Supper, you'll notice the feet for several of the apostles are present, but in the middle, there's this void where you can't see anything. Was this void carved there purposely by the church so that it doesn't reveal some information, or did Da Vinci put it there purposely? I believe he put it there purposely. This void is there to represent the granite tomb, and Jesus and Mary are represented as the Alpha and the Omega. The symbol A for Alpha, and the symbol, well, it's not an O, it's an Omega if you were to look up the Greek version of how it's actually drawn. Alpha and Omega are symbols that were inscribed into the granite of that sarcophagi. But the Alpha and Omega are reversed. Actually, that makes sense. Now, the Last Supper painting also conforms to the golden ratio. The alpha and omega are exactly 5.6 inches wide. If we were to put them together, alpha, omega, it's 5.6 inches wide. And the king's chamber is 31.415926 meters, or 10 pi. The square root of 10 pi is 5.606 inches, the same length as the alpha and omega. If we square this number, we get 31.41, the dimensions of the king's chamber, of the king's room. But it's also interesting to point out that at the peak of the letter A, you have the letter A right here, from the bottom to the top, it is at the 33rd inch of the 89.62 inch long sarcophagus. Well, what makes this odd is that this number is actually 1 over E, 1 over Euler's number. Euler's number is very significant in, well, many areas of mathematics, specifically finance. But this number was not discovered until Euler discovered it 200 years or so later. So, how did the builders of the pyramids know of Euler's number before it was ever discovered? Well, it wasn't made by humans, I'll tell you that much. Now, what else do we see in the Last Supper aside from the dimensions of the king's and queen's chambers, the Jesus Magdalene marriage, alpha and omega symmetry, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but Christ and Magdalene in the painting, that void, actually I did say, yeah, that is a perfect V. A perfect V. Now, what else do we see in the Last Supper? No, what I meant to say, apologies. The alpha and omega being Christ and Magdalene separated by the V, that same V is being separated on the inscription of the granite tomb. So it's identical almost. But what else do we see in the Last Supper? And these last parts are interesting. More ancient Egyptian esoteric wisdom and clues were found within the Last Supper. Now, if we were to look at the Last Supper painting behind Jesus in his room, behind Jesus in the room, above his head and above the window, we see on the pediment the eye of Ra, or the eye of the sun, the all-seeing eye dedicated to the sun god, or one can also say the Son of God, aka Jesus Christ. Now, we'll come back to that in a second, but let's talk about the third painting, or the fourth painting, correction, La Belle Frionere. I so pronounced that incorrectly. Or the Iron Maker's Daughter, that I could pronounce. This was painted by Da Vinci due to their odd relationship with her father, but that part's not terribly important. What is important is that this painting has a very dark background, like the night sky. Her part seems to be significant. On her head, there is a reverse T or a reverse cross. There is a band with an amber gem, and her hairline goes back, representing the reverse cross, or the Tau in Rosa Crucifixion. And there is also the amber gem at the center of this band. That it could be amber, but it also resembles the Ajna chakra, or the third eye in Indian culture. It is also called the Bindi. Now, the light caressing on her head, you can see a ray of light in the shape of a circle on her head. This resembles an iris, or the light of the light of the eye surrounded by darkness, and this is referring to the Eye of Thoth, as some refer to it as. And this goes back to the myth of Osiris and Seth. When Seth cut Osiris into 14 pieces and tossed him into the Mediterranean Sea to avenge his father's death, Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis, battled Seth and won, but not before losing his right eye, later to be restored by Thoth from magic or technology and science that we don't know of, but this is also known as Clarke's third law. Now, the healing of the Eye of Horus is now to be called the Eye of Thoth, and is the opposite of the Eye of Ra, for Ra is masculine in the Yang energy. Thoth is the feminine and Yin energy, the Yin and the Yang. The Yang being the intelligent, analytical, mathematical side of the brain, and the yin being the creative, positive, enlightening side of the brain. And so we have both the Ra and the Thoth, the yin and the yang, the two eyes that come together to create man. Now, crossing back to the Last Supper, and at the back of the king's chamber, there is within the back of the king's chamber, we see the eye of Thoth, and above Christ's head, we see the eye of Ra. And so these two come together to create a unity of both yin and yang, both masculine and feminine, alpha, omega, Christ and Magdalene. And the symbology can go on forever, but Da Vinci definitely knew a lot of this information from his time in Egypt, and most likely from his time as the Grand Master of the Priory of Sion. Interesting man, no doubt about it. The Renaissance man, without question. And we haven't even touched on some of his inventions that he created, which we won't get to on here, for this is only the encryptions we are focusing on in his paintings. And since these are the most popular, we are not going to go much further into it. But just know that he knew that there was a connection between Christianity and ancient Egypt, or Chem, for those who don't know. And it has been speculated by many people that the early version of Christianity, aka the original version of Christianity, stemmed from ancient Egyptian culture, and this is a still ongoing debate, but there is a lot of proof from both clairvoyants and biblical archaeological scholars that are coming out and saying, I don't know, Christianity actually originated in Egypt. Why did it originate in Egypt? That's a story for a different time. But basically, after the short story, long story short, after the Younger Dryas, after the Noah's Ark, we rebuilt civilization here on Earth with help of the gods, aka the Atlanteans and the ETs that helped us develop originally. And they developed Greece, Egypt, and Babylon around the same time. Again, history's been rewritten, so if it sounds strange, it's because it is strange to hear that. But Greece and Egypt all resembled the old Atlantean way and their religion and culture, which was indeed the Brotherhood of the Cross, the Brotherhood of the Christ. Christianity was actually the old Lyran way, the Atlantean way, and so they gave it to our new home that was known as Chem, and this is all within the esoteric knowledge that they left behind. Da Vinci just learned about it and encrypted it into his paintings for us to learn later on in life. A true mastermind that made true masterpieces that are deserve to be admired and studied to this day still. Now, many of these secrets are known, and it won't be far and long within time and space that they are revealed as to be truth. This was a relatively shorter podcast. It's been a little short recently, but sometimes a little bit of information, sometimes a short amount of time, you can fit a lot of information in there, especially when it's straightforward. But until the next time, I am not sure what we are going to be talking about the next time. Yeah, maybe Agartha. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, chances are we're going to do an Agartha podcast next time, so stay tuned for that. Until then, though, this has been the Rated R for Real podcast, where we bring only real truth, real knowledge, and real facts, though that those who don't want you to know, keep you in the dark, we reveal it to you. Till then, my name is Sam. Stay faithful. I will if you will. And have an excellent day.